feel compelled to really take my time to slice and dice this entree so we can really digest it to the point where we can gain all the nutrients that we need. And I'm going to do this in a way of doing a comparison and contrast, society versus spiritual. So let's chew. When sickness occurs, society says it's like a host needing a reservoir, a living, breathing organism in order to survive. You can be healthy, or your immunity could be low, causing you to become immunocompromised. And when this sickness spreads, it takes on the pathway via physical touch, air, the environment. For example, the common cold, the flu, tuberculosis, blood-borne pathogens, the mutation of cells to the point of infestation of internal organs. In comparison, yet slightly different, when attacked with a spiritual sickness, it too needs a living, breathing organism, and the host and reservoir needed for this would be an unhealed soul or a cold stone heart that feeds off of anger, jealousy, bitterness, unresolved issues from hurt and pain, from childhood wounds to adulthood that leads to unforgiveness. And when it's unattended or ignored, it becomes an infestation, causing chaos and confusion, which leads to the misery loves company complex. And society has labeled this sickness as being mental, which is a misclassification because God is calling it to be declassified as spiritual. Today, we're not here to talk about clinical diagnosis because I found that this sickness cannot even obtain healing from institutions like hospitals, doctors' offices, or psychiatry because it cannot be cured by scientific methodology or medical regimens. No, this sickness requires the armor of God and the miracle wonder working power of His almighty hands. And He shows us a prime example of this with the man that was spiritually ill, causing a miracle or a miraculous breakthrough by transmitting or transferring this illness from him to a herd of pigs. And he did this specifically so people can see that all the infliction that he was causing upon himself due to this affliction was not mental, but spiritual. And that's how he became free. Now, God could have went on and slayed that illness or that sickness, but he did it strategically so people could see this man becoming free and that it was not indeed mental, although mental instability can be a side effect from having spiritual sickness. And he also usually does this strategically by healing hands and or authoritative vocality through his children of light, also known as his living vessels who are willing and ready to be used by him and through him. But this is where we get tripped up because everybody not equipped to do this. God has, yes, given us dominion and power over these spiritual sicknesses, but it comes with a cost of going through rigorous training and dark shadow preparation in reception to the armor of God and the tutelage on how to use it properly. Because this sickness can be disguised like roaring lions seeking whom it can devour. This sickness walking around as wolves dressed in sheep clothing, sitting in the comfort of their own homes unseen and unheard. Even in the public, they're unseen. Even when listened to, they're unheard. Lurking in dark places, having internal deaths because they refuse to see or seek the light. Having a war raging within themselves in a place where they become sleeping in slumber. Hearts are heavy to the point where they don't know if they're coming or going. Don't got room for anything else. And he don't want us to become comfortable in a place of familiarity to the point where it become infested from anger, bitterness, and combativeness. The list goes on. If you've been exposed or experienced to alcoholism or drug addiction, sometimes they say it takes one to know one. Just the same, if you've been exposed or experienced darkness, spiritual sickness, it takes one to know one. Like when you see it, you be like, that ain't right. Something going on right there. But you got to have the experience, which leads us to it takes a specialized type of person who have overcome defeat within themselves or generational bloodlines and understands the victory of success to gain not just knowledge but also wisdom necessary to use the armor of God properly for oneself and sometimes as light workers or the children of light, I should say, and living vessels on the behalf of others. Hence his chosen ones. And yes, we are all God's children, but all of us are not what or who he considers or be to be called his chosen ones. I'm just keeping it real. There's different levels to this. We are all given the ability to gain the armor of God, just like the fruit of the Spirit. But you got to know how to fit it together slowly at the speed of light and swiftly. From head to toe, toe to head, left to right, right to left, front to back, back to front, because you don't know where these attacks coming from. So that's why I say this invitation has been extended to the battered, bruised, and the broken to show you God meant it for your good. The devil meant it for bad, but it was to get you prepped and trained for battle. That is why when we talk about the germination process, for some it's short-lived and for others it requires long suffering. Yes, we all have to go through that life, burial, resurrectional state throughout our whole lifespan. But even the more if we miss it during the initial phase, mistaking the germinational phase for fermentation, which leads to termination and is usually caused by a generational curse. Because during that germinational phase, the seed that was meant to be good decided to listen to the negativities that was passed down and allow that to take root instead of taking the inner knowing of being a child of light and fighting against it. Instead of having that I will not let you go until you bless me effect. And yeah, God don't want, like in the example, for the transmission or the transference of this spiritual sickness to go from person to person. He wants it to come to a screeching halt. Like, go ahead and let's get it, let's get it slayed. But we have to be willing to allow that to happen, to go through that healing process. And sometimes, no, we ain't strong enough. The spirit is willing, but the flesh can be weak. And that's why it would take somebody who is healed to come along and help you through it. That's where that authoritative vocality is going to come in and say, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. Get thee behind me. So the short-lived say, let me out of here. Sometimes I ain't thinking about no healing. I'm all right just the way I am, gossiping and being in the circle around the unhealed, not ready to go through the fire, eating with the unhealed, sleeping with the unhealed. That's where transmission takes place. Just being keeping it 100. But then you got the long sufferers who say, I'm tired of being tired in this state. However, leave me right here and let me stay here to face what it is I need to face, to the point where it becomes a part of you, but not overtake you. So you can be able to bust the darkness wide open, shattering it to pieces by obtaining even more power, to where your senses become heightened in the dark. Sometimes you just prefer to be in the dark because you done gained night vision. You light it up without even being seen. That's through that rigorous training and preparation. You can smell it and taste it to the point where you can chew it up and spit it out and gain even more power, where all the other spiritual buddies start running the other way, per se. Although you saw dark days, you refused to lose. You could not lose. God will not even allow it, because even through it all, you were being used, and you may not have even known it. To gain the capacity to bounce back with a vengeance. It was a setup to be a step up in his mighty army. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy gonna come in the morning. What it says. And for the bound and the bitter, you either gonna live by facing your inner darkness and iniquities, or causing bruises, battery, or brokenness, or you gonna die by way of denying accountability. The choice is yours. But God wants you to choose to live, because he said he will leave the 99 just for the sake of one. And just as he was bruised, battered, and broken, it was for a reason. To gain extraordinary power, to be able to come back and say, you get some power, and you get some power, and you get some power. So together we can put all the power together and conquer all. He was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was and is upon him. With his stripes, by his stripes, we are healed. And he wants everybody to understand that we are healed. What manner of man is this that he will lay down his life? How can I become healed? There's only one way, and that is through love. Now, how do we obtain that love? Understanding that we are love, but we have to love God and love ourselves. And that heart of stone need to be turned into flesh. I know it sounds contradicting that the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. But in order to receive his love, that heart has to be turned into flesh. And we're going to show you how.